I stand before you tonight feeling as I think a lot of people are feeling. Unmoored, maybe unsafe. And for those of you that don't know, in just a few weeks, God willing, I'll be welcoming a child into the world. And it has been so hard this week to see pictures of those babies, to see their red hair. And I've spent this entire week just feeling like the entire world was upside down. And as I've been doing more and more lately, which is sad but true, I've been doom scrolling through the news. And it feels like every day we turn on the news and there's another horrific picture that we see. And this past Monday, I opened up AP or Reuters or whatever it was that I opened up at the time, and I saw this picture. So for those of you that don't know, this was a plane on Monday flying into Toronto, landed, but as you can see, landed belly up. And there was something about this picture, and for those of you who don't know the news story, thanks to quick action by emergency responders and the airplane staff, there were no casualties. Everyone survived, with some injuries, of course. But there was something about this picture that disturbed me on an existential level, which is saying a lot because it feels like every day existential dread grows and grows. I was looking at this picture, and you look at it, and it's like something that is meant to be in the air, that's meant to be flying, is grounded. Not only grounded, but turned upside down, figuratively and literally. And in interviews after the incident, passengers on the flight reported hanging like bats as the plane was turned over, waiting for rescue. Hanging from their seats, trapped, hanging upside down. And I don't know about you, but for at least 500 days, I've felt like I was in that plane. Like I've been hanging upside down, trapped, awaiting some kind of rescue, some kind of answer, but nonetheless trapped in this endless cycle of frustration, confusion, anger, grief, and cynicism. And I'm not talking about politics, guys. Regardless of politics, regardless of where you stand on the latest culture war headline, that's not what I'm talking about. It's a feeling that, for whatever reason, our world has been turned upside down. And when that happens, we ask ourselves, how do we live? What do we do? What's the answer? When we look out west and we see wildfires engulfing entire communities, synagogues, homes, schools, the world is upside down. When people feel empowered to fly imagery that has been fought against since the 1930s and maybe before. Just happened in my hometown in Cincinnati. The world is upside down. And when the bodies of 2 babies are brought home in caskets, which are used by terrorists in a perverse propaganda that somehow only seems to be getting more shares, more likes, more legitimized every single day, the world is upside down. And I think to a certain extent, in different ways, we're all feeling this sense. Something is off. And I find myself praying in ways that I rarely do, pleading with God for answers, for clarity, for the day when it's a foregone conclusion that all of humanity is sacred, that we are all made in the image of God, B'Tselem Elohim. But sadly, I think we all know that the answer is not going to come neatly wrapped in a bow. We know this because we're the Jewish people, and we've been here before. We've been here existing in this upside-down world, a world of fear and uncertainty. In fact, it was in a time of fear and uncertainty that we ceased to become this loose collective of formerly enslaved individuals. It was in a time of fear and uncertainty that we became the Jewish people. And ever since then, ever since that moment at Sinai, every time we as a people have confronted fear and uncertainty, we have reaffirmed our faith in that peoplehood. It's no coincidence that we're reading the revelation at Sinai right now. In the Parsha this week, Mishpatim. But if you'll allow me to jump back to last week's portion a little bit. In Parshat Yitro, the Israelites are first approaching Sinai. And the Torah reads that on the third day when the Israelites awoke, they awoke to thunder and lightning, blaring horns, thick fog, and they followed Moses to the foot of Mount Sinai where they were terrified. And you may have heard this rabbinic teaching, right, that all of us, all Jews, past, present, and future, were actually there at Sinai. It's experiencing that. I mean, just imagine the sensory overload alone, the fear, the uncertainty, trembling. We gathered at Sinai, unsure of our future. And if the thunder and the lightning and the smoke and the horns weren't enough to overwhelm you, well, Midrash has something for that. Midrash, the rabbinic creative mind. There's a line in last week's portion as they're approaching Mount Sinai, as the Israelites are approaching Mount Sinai. And the rabbis latch on to this sentence, and a lot of Midrash comes out of it. The Torah teaches that the Israelites station themselves betachtit hahar, beneath the mountain. Tachtit, from the Hebrew tachat, if you're a Yiddish speaker, tochas. It means bottom. So the Torah doesn't say that the Israelites stood next to the mountain, as you would assume. Instead, they stood betachtit, underneath the mountain. So the rabbis pick up on this, as they're wont to do. And they came to a pretty startling conclusion that they all generally seem to agree on, which doesn't happen a lot with the rabbis. In this moment, betachtit hahar, underneath the mountain, God had lifted Mount Sinai and was holding it above the Israelites. Imagine that. A mountain floating in the sky. Now, the Midrash that I first learned around this moment is pretty dark. It teaches that in that moment, in order to maybe encourage the Israelites to make the right decision, God was doing a little coercion. God held up the mountain above the people and said, look, I'm offering you Torah. Accept Torah and you have life. Reject it. This will be your grave. Or you will be buried here. There is what the text says. Really, really dark. But a beginning to our peoplehood. Not all rabbis take that dark approach. There's actually a challenge to the cynical interpretation, and of course, this midrash still concedes that, of course, the mountain was being held up in the air magically above the Israelites' head, and the Israelites were batachtit hahar, right, underneath the mountain. But in this midrash, the rabbis draw on imagery found in the Song of Songs, which talks about a dove, a bird of peace, being protected by God in the cranny of a rock. So this midrash pulls from that and says, actually, the Israelites were terrified, and God was well aware. God takes notice of their suffering, of their fear, and their uncertainty, lifts Mount Sinai up, and creates a chuppah of protection. Fear, uncertainty, coercion, compassion. Which midrash is right? We don't have an answer. Did we become a people under duress? Did we become a people who were unified under a protective and loving God? We won't know. Unless you have a time machine. If you do, let's talk. And our rabbis had their opinions, of course. But because our tradition is one in which multiple truths are preserved, we have these conflicting midrashim. And no answer. But there is one thing that I believe we can take from these competing midrash. One certainty in all of the fear and uncertainty is that in that time, we became a people. Regardless of why the mountain was hanging above our heads, we became a people in that moment. And since that day, at the foot of Sinai, we have been Amcha, your people, God's people. And we have faced innumerable hardships. But each and every time we have persevered. How have we done that? We've done that by remaining connected, by staying connected to each other, by reaffirming constantly our faith in the power of peoplehood. So I stand before you on this Shabbat, scared and uncertain, without an obvious answer to what we do next. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, nor do I have the answers to the problems that plague the world. And if someone claims that they have all the answers, I caution you to take a moment to consider. But this is what I do know. I know that under Sinai, we became a people. I know that many of us in this room have a code to that front door. I know that there are comfortable chairs in our sanctuary, and Torahs in our ark, and there are clergy, educators, staff who would love nothing more than to support you in this time. We don't have answers, but we have each other. And I know that I speak for each and every clergy member when I say, let us come to this place, to this Beit Elohim, to this house of God, and be together. Let's lean in, as we've done as a people for thousands of years. Let's study Torah together. Let's cry together. Let's debate together. Let's be together. In this week's Parsha, Mishpatim, God calls upon Moses. Alei alai hahar v'heyeh sham. Come up to me on the mountain and be there. Alei alai hahar v'heyeh sham. Come up to the mountain and be there. Presence. Our presence is more powerful than we realize. And it's through this presence, this offering of presence, that we reaffirm our peoplehood. So as we stand together under this modern day mountain of uncertainty, we, like Moses, are being called. Better believe it. We are being called to come up to the mountain and be present. The difference? Moses had to go alone. We will go together. Shabbat shalom.
Sitting in silence, we're not okay. The things our nation's been through, the pain will never go away. All I see is darkness. How much can we take? But the spirit of Am Yisrael, that will never break. Somehow, even in the darkest moments, Am Yisrael perseveres through it all. Even when the world seems broken, even when the tears don't seem to dry, we will rise above, we will stand as one, Am Yisrael Chai. Even when the pain feels so heavy, even when it's hard to see the light, we will rise above, we will stand as one, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. The emotions are endless. We can feel so alone, but we will rise up united. We will get through this as one. Somehow, even in the darkest moments, Am Yisrael perseveres through it all. Even when the world seems broken, even when the tears don't seem to dry, we will rise above, we will stand as one, Am Yisrael Chai. Even when the pain feels so heavy, even when it's hard to see the light, we will rise above, we will stand as one, Am Yisrael Chai. Even when the world seems broken, even when the tears don't seem to dry, we will rise above, we will stand as one, Am Yisrael Chai. Even when the pain feels so heavy, even when it's hard to see the light, we will rise above, we will stand as one, Am Yisrael Chai.